Are you an early stage founder looking to grow your SaaS? The SaaStock Founder Membership is a private community of ambitious SaaS founders where you can get a support network of peers, connect with like-minded founders around the globe, and learn proven strategies from industry experts to help you scale up your SaaS. If you want to get access to peer groups, investor meetings, mentor hours, and more to help you scale faster together, then visit saastock.com/founder-membership to apply, or just go to saastock.com and go up to the header menu and click on memberships. And if in your application form, if it's right for you, mention the SaaS Revolution show to apply for an exclusive discount. Find your SaaS tribe and thrive with the SaaStock Founder Membership.
Imagine if all your customers paid up front the moment you signed a contract. What would it mean for you? Capchase helps fast-growing recurring revenue companies finance growth without taking on debt or dilution. Whether you want to invest in growth or R&D, Capchase turns your predictable revenue into growth capital today. Capchase has helped founders unlock hundreds of millions in financing to fuel their growth, on average extend their runway by 8 months and spared upwards of 16% dilution. See how insanely easy it is by clicking the link in the show notes or going to capchase.com/SaaStock to learn more.
Can be even better if we understand who in that customer base that you want more of, who you are not a good fit for. If that clarity exists, then whatever the pace that you are growing, you can actually grow even faster because the entire organization can align around it, is my biggest learning.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the SaaS Revolution show, brought to you by SaaStock, the conference that helps SaaS companies get traction, growth, and scale. I'm your host, Alex Thuma, and I'll be looking at what it really takes to build and grow a SaaS company today, and how founders and entrepreneurs stay healthy on the journey. Now on with the show.
Welcome to the SaaS Revolution show. Krish Subramanian, CEO and co-founder at ChargeBee. How are you doing, Krish? Good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm not sure if this is correct information, but I heard that you moved to Amsterdam. Are my sources correct?
I am, right. I'm in Amsterdam office right now. Yes. Moved 2 months back with family. Yes. And we now have a 35-member European team. So it's good to be here.
Very cool. What was the reason to move to Amsterdam? Was it just about growing this European office, or what was the reason?
European business is doing well, right? And so we have leadership teams that have been built in India and US reasonably well. And then it felt like, okay, I could lend a hand and then also be, from a time zone perspective, I'm available in both the time zones in India with the larger team there, but the customer base is heavily in, like 95% customers are US and Europe based for us. So it makes sense for me to be closer to the time zone of the customers. And Europe makes it much, much more easier not to like completely move to the US versus like being in the middle to serve everyone. So
what's one of the main differences between Chennai and Amsterdam?
Interesting. I think infrastructure, right? Even after 2 months, I still don't have a car and I don't miss it. Mm-hmm. Love it to just bicycle around or just take the bus. So it's so convenient. And things have opened up, right? More safer in the current environment. Now the offices are open in Europe. So it's good.
Well, good stuff. Well, actually, I believe that I will be in Amsterdam in September. We're doing, I think we're doing SaaStock Local Amsterdam, returning in person. So you'll have to come. We'll have to organise it, and
let's do it in our office.
Yeah, well, I think the location may have been selected, but we'll sort it out, and definitely we'll have to do dinner or something. But at least you come to that event. So look forward to that, and in-person events returning. So that'll be great. But Krish, you've been on the podcast a couple of times now, and I think actually I first met you at SaaStock 2016 in Dublin, and I believe ChargeBee was at seed stage. I mean, in 2016, was that correct? Seed Series A?
See, whatever the ABC is, but more importantly, it was like, okay, we had the product market fit. We were serving a few hundred customers, and we were about, I think, 50, 60 people at that time. Yes.
And what's the difference? What's the difference where you are now? You're a Series G, 218 million in funding. How many people? What's new about sort of like you and ChargeBee that perhaps we was different, obviously, from apart from the size, back then?
Now we serve over 3,500 paying customers globally, and business continues to be 50% North America, more than 45% is Europe, and the rest in APAC. And a team of about close to 600 people now, with close to 75 people now in US, 35 people in Europe, and the rest in India. And I think from a maturity standpoint, a couple of years back, we still did not have a senior leadership team. Right now, we have the senior leadership team of CROs, CPO, CMO, right, hired, right, and CFO, right. All of those people identified, hired, and with each of them building their own organizations in a different way. And I'm also learning as a founder to let go, give away the Lego blocks, and then like walk the perimeter, right, while everybody else is playing the ball, right. And so it's actually a very interesting transition to go through that. So that's happening. Are
you still? You mentioned about learning as a founder. Again, now I guess you've got this team of 600. Are you still learning? Do you feel like as much now as you were back in the early days, or is like foot off the gas on the learning side of things?
Actually, learning is on steroids, is how I would put it. The reason is, see, as founders, we try to do a little bit of everything, right, and a little bit of mind share into multiple functions, and we try to do best of what we can at that time. And now we are able to observe others actually giving 100% mindshare into every one of the functions, and how they are actually scaling the rituals in every function seems very different. Like our product team has their own all hands every week, right? And then what do they talk about is very different. And our sales has the war threads that goes on, which people feed off each other's energy about all the deals they are working on and how they actually go about it. It's very interesting to see people actually execute the rituals they bring into every function, the microcultures that actually form. Which as a founder you could not do, because it's like everybody is equal, and then you give a little bit of mindshare everywhere, versus each function actually evolving nicely is a lot of learning. And then now I have, like, my staff meeting is now a very interesting learning experience for me to have a set of folks who are very senior, who are almost like advisors, right, working and what I bring to the table is a context of the customers and the organization and the progress. But what they bring in is a specialization in terms of a career spent only as a specialist to doing something very, very specific, right? And so the learning is definitely amazing to watch them execute and then continue to enable.
Looking back to your journey, to and past 10 million ARR, some years ago, what was like? I'm sure it was multiple things, of course, that you and the business did and your team did to kind of help you push, through past 10 million ARR. But can you kind of pick like one, kind of like one thing or so that really kind of helped and made a difference?
Sure, right. I think the context here I think this is a podcast for founders, right? So it's very important that we share I want to make sure I share the context, right? So things did not come easily for us, right? It was a real struggle through the first 5 years, where 2 years was spent bootstrapping, then we took money, and then still after that for 3 years plus, we were figuring out things. So there was this figuring out phase that was happening for 4 or 5 years, but thankfully we had very patient people who were just backing us to continue to solve the same problem, right? And like get to a point where we were able to do this well, right? And then once the things started scaling, it's scaling beautifully. But that's how it was, right? And then when you actually get to a point where you are able to like get from the 1 to 10 million in less than like 8 or 9 quarters, then that's amazing. And that happened to us in scale. So in hindsight, I'm able to look at it as a bunch of learnings that I hope to be able to pass on as shared learnings for others to be able to do it better. But by no means I'm actually saying this is how we did it, we got it right first time, right? So with that caveat, I think for me, the biggest learning is some of the counterintuitive things that we had to do between that 1 to 10 million journey that was super helpful, right? A case in point, one of the things is the feature bloat that happens is something that we all commit to very subconsciously in the product. For example, nobody purchases ChargeBee in a buying decision thinking, oh, so these guys have text email and also HTML email that allows us to send beautiful emails. That's not a differentiator. And that's not a feature based on which somebody is purchasing the product. And yet, as an engineer founder, right, you tend to think, oh, that's so important. And then we ended up putting this one simple thing called HTML email. And then every single feature that we had to ship out, like one field that we add, we had to think, oh, is this supposed to get included in that order email, subscription email, notification? And how is it supposed to look? Browser testing, mobile, all form factor. We had to do all of that. This is crazy, right? So this is why now I'm able to realize that, okay, now every feature that we added previously has that cascading effect of slowing us down later. The second most important one for me as a biggest learning was, it would look like when we are hitting product market fit and we are able to sell to like a few hundred customers, it almost feels like, yes, we are selling well and there is a velocity, but actually it can be even better if we understand who in that customer base that you want more of, who you are not a good fit for. If that clarity exists, then whatever the pace that you are growing, you can actually grow even faster because the entire organization can align around it, is my biggest learning. As an example, we at that time, right, we used to have a mix of customers where services businesses and then SaaS businesses and different types of businesses were in charge. Right, imagine having 200 customers, and then but you know that there is a 50 of your existing customers are a perfect fit. Right, if you get 500 more of those, you would love to take them all day long because one, they are like finding every feature that you are building, like almost most features valuable. Second, the features that you are building, they will actually consume it. It's not like some of them will use it, but all these 50 will use it. The other 150 may actually ignore the new features that you are building. And the third one is, it also, you do not waste your time and money in acquiring leads which are not that perfect fit, because the success of the compounding nature of SaaS is that it has to drive net retention rate. Whatever feature you are building, that your consumption of that needs to go up, and the new features that you want to be able to cross sell later, you want them, you want to build things that people will actually consume. So this segmentation and taking time out to actually understand your existing customer base and knowing which ones are green, that's a perfect fit, which ones are yellow, that's like an okay fit, like which ones are red, where it wouldn't hurt you if the customer leaves or you don't get more of those customers, not because they are bad customers, just that they are not the best customers for you. Mm-hmm. They're probably a great customer for somebody else who thinks of them in the green bucket. You probably don't think of them in the green bucket is important, right? I think that counterintuitive nature, instead of actually trying to think like, okay, every customer who's showing up at the doorstep and trying to get into service mentality to acquire them, instead deliberately making that clear across the organization. I wish I had done that earlier, like giving that level of clarity to the marketing team, to the sales team, to know who's the marketing should know who is likely to become a sales qualified lead, right? And then product should know who sales is actually going to bring in and who they are going to say no to. Like across organization, implementation team, customer success team, everybody should have the same vocabulary to have this level of clarity. I think is a thing that we don't invest enough time into to get to that level of clarity, but I wish we had done more of that. I think this, right, sets you up for amazing NRR, net retention rate, where your customer sticks, your 20-30% growth comes from the existing customers, right? And when you do that and then you get any new customer, your LTV CAC actually goes up significantly because you know exactly whom to bring more of. I think those were like the biggest learnings to know, especially in that phase of the journey.
It's great. It was great learning. I mean, I see. It's weird because I read so much about this, and you know the ICP, and you kind of hear so much about it. I wonder also if it's because I consume like quite a lot of content, and I'm looking in certain areas that there is like, I don't know, I'm in a bit of a bubble around that. But I feel like perhaps this lesson and looking at the ICP is something that now early stage founders certainly should be aware of a lot more. But having said that, there's still this temptation, right? Or let's say, okay, you carve out, who's the ICP, and then let's say, I don't know, a big customer kind of comes in and they don't fit the ICP, but they're going to have a 6-figure contract, or more. And your sales rep is talking to them and they're looking at, well, the 6-figure contract is going to help me somewhat to, hit my quota and help the business. But you're feeling that actually, well, this is outside the ICP, and is it actually going to be a good customer for the business? So we're talking about, moving into talking about the art of saying no. But when saying saying yes, let's say to customers, have you said yes to customers in the past that were a wrong fit? And was it regarding, were they a wrong fit because of they were going to give you a lot of feature requests that you probably would take you off track, or that you just knew that you wouldn't necessarily satisfy them potentially kind of with this product again because they just weren't the right ICP. So have you done that? Has there been an example? And then what the outcome is? Because pretty much everybody I've spoken to has said yes, including ourselves, right? And then you kind of know that, it might not necessarily kind of work out that well. And it always, almost always ends up like what your gut was telling you.
Yeah. I think I have a very specific example of a customer who was a perfect fit, and over the course of their journey, how it actually turned into something where we had to have that mutual conversation to part ways. Right? I think this one is actually specifically Soylent. Phenomenal. I think they got phenomenal press, right? And then we got them as an early customer when they were first few millions. And then at that time, the team was completely digital first in customer acquisition. And they were an e-commerce store, in a true sense, where they were having a tech stack. They could actually consume API because the founder was one of the CTOs. One of the founder was a CTO. So it's a perfect fit for an API first product like ChargeBee. It was a perfect fit, right? And then we scaled with them. And then using that logo name, we were able to get so many more people because they were they knew Soylent. Oh, they are funded by Andreessen Horowitz, and they are using you, right? And then you get that initial traction because you get them a good name as a customer. At what point did we realize that we are not a good fit was when their business was hitting scale, and they were actually realizing that for them to get to that $1 billion of revenue, they had to go stores. They went into Whole Foods, and then they had to get shelf space in retail stores for them to scale their business because it's a food business. And then for them, e-commerce, they figured was going to be a minuscule part of that strategy. And pretty much everything else that they do has to be store first, and then the footprint of this was going to be very different. And that's when we realized that it's going to be very hard, right? We could have either hacked our revenue path to say, okay, yes, it's going to be large, and then let's figure out how to solve for it. But we realized that it's going to be, even if our paths converge at some point where we might have ambitions to go there to support a business like that, it would actually take us from a majority of our customers that we were already committed to and to scale, right? And that's when we had to tell them that, no, we are not going to be able to do all of this because it doesn't even align in our priorities for the next 2-3 years. We are not able to see ahead, right? To say, okay, at what point we want to say yes to all the features that you are asking. So it was actually a customer that we had said yes to and benefited a lot mutually working with them. And then we could see that, okay, so this is a customer where we had to part ways simply because of the paths diverging.
Why is it important? I guess we move to say no to customers, and I think beyond that, it's important saying no to many things. But in this instance, saying no to customers, why is it important, and what use cases should we be using that word?
I think if we truly believe that, one Australia customer, right, specifically said it was supposed to be a $40,000 deal at that time, pretty big deal at that time for us. And the customer had, we could see a mutual fit of all the features they asked for today, right? But what we saw was they had certain requirements to actually expand in a particular way, and the customer was asking, hey, do you think you will build this at some point in time in the future, right? And we could not see us adding that, prioritizing that in the next 3 to 4 quarters. Because it was not a fit at all for us in terms of when we look at pretty much all the other customers that we were having at that time. And I remember having a very hard, because the customer had invested time in evaluating us and they were ready to sign. And it was also, the sales was really fighting because they were super annoyed that this was one of the large deals at that time for us. And then we were actually internally telling our sales team that, no, we cannot do it. And they were pushing for features like it's just one or two features, and they were asking for that at that time, right? So the conversation we had was, yes, it is possible for us to make an exception about the one or two features, but it's the one or two that they know today, right? Let's have a call with the customer to just understand their roadmap. So we went into the call and then tried to understand, like, can we truly believe that we can be a partner to help your growth for the next, like, foreseeable 3 to 5 years? Because you are committing to, like, it's not every day you change a billing system, right? So it's they're looking at a long-term partnership. And we could not honestly tell ourselves, like, if we were in the customer's shoe, if you knew the roadmap, right, would you actually try and get the money today, knowing that you may not prioritize that even after 1 year? Then we had to tell them the truth and said, we may choose to say we will double down in your space if we expand vertically into your market. But at this point, I cannot guarantee and say, okay, at some point we'll do it. And we don't want to be in a situation where we hijack our roadmap, and just because we said yes initially, like it might become a business decision rather than one customer decision, and that's not the right way to treat it. So it was painful. Internally, the sales team was heavily emotionally invested, and it felt like we are robbing them of, like, a big win. And we had to also tell the customer that, and very interestingly, 6 months later, the customer came back saying, what's the status? I think this is worth exploring. I think after 12 months was when we eventually won them, right? And we did get them as a customer later, 12 months later, when we could give clarity. But it was a hard conversation, but it was that instance that led to VP of sales and our product leader and me, right, having that heated debate to talk about this. And then we said, okay, now how do we draw the ICP in a way that the sales knows they don't emotionally get too invested in certain deals? What is that? Let's go define that. And then we started writing all the characteristics of the businesses and started giving more granular details to the rest of the organization. To, okay, this is our, like, clearly where you will say it's yes. These are the ones where you have to ask the product before you commit. And how do we change our process where the qualifying is more stronger earlier to understand these characteristics? And then we also gave a list to say these characteristics you will say no clearly, right? And then I think that those friction points are good if we, like, use it effectively.
No, definitely. I mean, is there an art to saying no, and to still be customer centric? And if so, if you've learned that, please share with our audience.
I think treat them like how we would like to be treated, right? I think the specific example is just being very empathetic to tell them that I would love to take the money, but at the same time, can I serve you with that full conviction that I can support you through the journey? That conversation becomes very important. Having that authentic conversation with the customer is super helpful. And I think we have never shied away from pointing them to alternate options, even if they are competitors, if that's actually a better fit. I think that level of candor in the conversation generally is appreciated by customers. If we can wear the consultant hat and be very objective about that recommendation, I think those are the times when it's actually much easier to say yes or no. Right? And internally, championing and speaking for the customer is very important, and not taking a position to say, how do I trick our team to somehow get yes, is not the intent, right? So it's very important to educate the team more and more about it and why it's painful. Like at scale, incentives are really helpful. Like the incentive structures to penalize sales team if we bring in a wrong customer and the customer actually leaves in 3 months because of a misfit, where we go down the implementation path, and then if we don't find a fit, if the customer has to be churned out, then the earnings get taken out of the salesperson, right, in their quota.
Yeah,
are systemic things that you can do, but that's just controls to drive a particular behavior. The more important one is to openly talk about losses, right? So one thing we started doing was in the all hands meetings, not just talk about wins, but also talk about these kind of losses and why it's painful for the customer, why it's painful for us in the long run, how does it affect all of us, especially in front of the GTM teams. Generally builds a little bit more empathy, right? It's not just that it's not lack of ambition, it's not lack of hunger to want to win every customer, prospect as a customer. It's just that from 3,000 customers, if you want to go to 100,000 customers, you should get comfortable with knowing which 900,000 customers you are going to say no to, so that you can get the 100,000 customers, right? And not get stuck with like 5,000 customers, right? Get stuck at that number, right? So if you want to go longer, then how do you actually make these sacrifices? Is a process of continuous education inside.
No, definitely. And what about outside of saying no to the customers, just in general, as a founder or, as an exec, how important is it to kind of, say no and at what times, what are the benefits? So have you any examples of, how maybe you've moved away from saying yes to lots of things to now potentially saying no, and what has the impact been?
So there are 3 stages, right? One is, if especially in inbound product market fit stage, we say yes to get a diverse set of customers to explore where you find product market fit. So you are likely to say more yes to different types of customers to explore like where you find the fit, right? With some hypothesis, iteratively you find that. Then there is a next phase of growth between the 1 to 10 when we actually say no to a large number of customers, especially if okay, now this is the set of customers I want to grow with, right? That's the second stage when we say no to a lot of customers. But the beautiful thing is, if we do these 2 phases correctly, the third phase is you get more of the similar customers. That actually gives you the right to be able to say yes more often, because they are all similar customers and you are scaling. I think that's the most counterintuitive thing that I have learned in this part. There is another one that I'm now noticing, which is happening, which is the stretch, where there is always that one big customer who's coming in, and the sales team, because we all play in the fringes, where if you get like 100 customers who are at 50K, you always get like a couple of customers who are like $1 million, $500,000 deal, and then showing at the doorstep. Now what happens? Because it's exciting to be able to move up market with the customers, and these deals like make a month if you actually win them. Now what do you do? Writing those things down about like when we will make an exception for that stretch customer and involving key decision makers in that process has been super helpful, where that council of people actually make a decision to say yes or a no. And the decision rights are also very clear in such instances, makes it much, much more easier. I'll give you an example. So we had this huge manufacturing company from Europe, which is a public company bringing in $1 billion of ARR into becoming subscription business. And they said they are projecting $1 billion and all of that. And then they said, okay, we want to come in. And the group of people, like including the product leader, revenue leader, and the marketing leader, they had to make a call to say, okay, now how easy is it? And more importantly, customer success and implementation. They had to make a call to say, okay, can we like confidently say we can deliver value to them and defend that value long term? They were not feeling comfortable with it. They said, we may invest a lot of energy and into trying to win them, but here's where we are going to say no. The moment the deal bubbled up to a point where the salesperson wanted to keep it like a secret, low-key thing, where the opportunity value was not even big, because they wanted to like try and see how long further along they can go, even though the logo indicated that yes, this can be big. It's very interesting because it's just natural human behavior, right? And they were getting emotionally invested. The moment it bubbled up, somebody had to put the brakes on it and say, okay, now are we really committed to doing that? And then the council of people, the decision rights was with them to say no to that, right? And every year we decided that when we were drawing up the roadmap to say, we will make 5 exceptions for stretch customers, but no more than that. But the following year, the beautiful thing is now you've expanded the footprint of who you can serve as a customer, from going from $6,000 ACV customers to $20,000 ACV customers to $50,000 ACV customers becomes like a regular. Then you now call $50,000 to $250,000 customers as exceptions, right? And there is a phase when we are able to say yes to the larger customers, and we keep expanding the footprint of who we can serve credibly without pulling the entire organization to get them over the line. And also, like, you don't want your developers, engineers, everybody to code for a single customer, right? You want everybody to focus on like largest amount of customers and make very few exceptions. I think this is a constant struggle, and we are always finding product market fit in a new segment all the time. Because the beauty of SaaS is it allows us to be able to stretch a little bit to serve more and more customers as you build up features. But it's very important to be able to have clarity about decision rights in the organization, and then designate certain people to make those exceptions, and also allow them the freedom to say no has been my biggest learning, because that tells the entire sales organization and marketing organization like how the decision will be made. I think people want this to be fair process, even because for every one of them, it's like I notice when people actually say my customer, right? And sometimes you always feel like, oh, why is this level of attachment to that? But from their perspective, it's like they are so closely tied to wanting to win this one deal and then championing that almost like even the vocabulary people use, you start seeing that emotional attachment. But it's also important to help them understand that it's about the customer, organization, the team, and then the individual, right? And we cannot reverse this order to actually make exceptions. Then we are only going to be making exceptions.
Fantastic point, and I think a great way to end the show as we come to time there, Krish. But look, it's been fantastic speaking to you and having you back on the SaaS Revolution show. Looking forward to connecting in Amsterdam, hopefully in September. I'll have to figure out when the dates are. But really appreciate that and you sharing again with the SaaS audience from some fantastic lessons there on the art of saying no and still being customer centric. Thanks so much, Krish Subramanian, CEO of ChargeBee.
Thanks so much, Alex, for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the SaaS Revolution Show. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you learned something from it, check out sasdoc.com/events to find all the upcoming SaaSdoc conferences around the world.